As two of these gentlemen up here said who they were, they didn't tell the whole story. Dick Heron and John Gallagher are otherwise known as the Beacon Boys. These two gentlemen were very instrumental in the beacon restoration, which sits on top of Mount Diablo. They have been very dedicated to the beacon to honor our Pearl Harbor survivors, which is only lit one day out of the year, and that is on December 7th, to honor the 2403 men that perished at Pearl on December 7th, 1941. The presentation that they have put together is fabulous, and some of you may have seen it in the past, and some of you may have to wait until like December 7th to see it in the near future, but today you're going to see it. It's an excellent presentation. There's a great group picture of our survivors that were on top of Mount Diablo for the taking down of the beacon and for the replacement of the beacon, putting it back up. So to me it holds a lot of good memories because some of our survivors that are in the picture are no longer with us. John Tate is one of them, and B.J. Smith is the other one. So they do an excellent presentation at this time. I'd like to turn it over to Dick, if you're not choking to death. Dick
Heron. John put together the pictures, and he's the historian of the two of us. So I'm going to let him do most of the speaking. I did want to add that my first introduction to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association was helping John Farley walk up the steps to the ceremony when it used to be up at the summit. So the Farleys hold a special place in my heart too. John will tell all about the history.
I'm not sure how I got roped into this. Dick knows the history of the beacon every bit as well as I do. The only difference is I know how to put a presentation together like this, and he didn't. So I ended up with this project. Oh, yeah. There we go. That better? That better? Okay, I'm going to start just talking a little bit about the beacon and how it fit in to our nation's history, and then I'll talk about how Save Mount Diablo and Dick and I got involved in sponsoring the beacon lighting, and then and the restoration of it. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So it turns out that this beacon atop Mount Diablo was one of actually hundreds and hundreds of beacons that stretched across the country, north and south, east and west. This is but one route of the beacons that we had. That roughly is following Interstate 80, of course. And they were not about the military at all. They were about commerce. If you look at the stamp at the very top of the screen and at the very bottom, it actually says United States Post Office. And what they were looking for was a way to allow airplanes in the pre-radar days to fly at night. During the teens and early 20s, an airplane would fly with a bag full of mail during the daytime, and when it came to sundown, they would put the bag of mail on a train, and the train would go all night. And then and the next morning, another plane would pick up the mail and fly it to the next location. So, again, we didn't have radar, and thus they started building these beacons all over the country. It was a big deal. they needed to be every 10 or 15 miles to give you a feel for the quantity of beacons. Some were very small, some were as little as an acetylene flame that burned all day and all night. And then others, like the one on Monte Diablo, were actually relatively large. This is one of the Monte Diablo beacon is one of the biggest ones that we know of. Here's how they did it. For the people that enjoy flying, it's worth looking at the size of the engine in that airplane. This is back in the days when if they wanted to make an engine more powerful for anything, the only thing they could do was make it bigger. And so there's this little tiny plane and a little tiny car and this giant engine in it. But that's how it was all done. There was a lot of fanfare, a lot of publicity about this beacon system because we wanted to have mail to be able to go back and forth. Notice the postage stamp there. And the sort of typical tower that's there in that magazine drawing. Here's another one showing the plan of how many of these were constructed. There's, of course, the tower, a variety of different heights of the tower, and in fact, it's even labeled here, 51, 62, all the way up to 152 feet high erector set type towers. And then at the lower right there is a little generator because these are way out in rural areas. You know, they were stretching across Nevada and Utah and Wyoming and so forth every 15 miles or so. We did, in fact, have them locally here. The tower there, you can see the beacon at the top. It's relatively small compared to our beacon. Anybody have a clue where that one is? How about the Livermore Airport? It's there to this day. And it wasn't until just a couple of weeks ago that I happened to be at the Livermore Airport. My daughter and her boyfriend had just flown in his plane, and I parked in the parking lot, and I looked up and went, my gosh, right in our backyard. Many different sponsors got involved in these things. This is the Atlantic Richfield Company. And that, of course, well, you can see it. It's Mount Shasta City with Mount Shasta in the background. That photo, of course, you can tell by the car, was taken in the 1950s. But, in fact, the image on the right is from Google Street View. That tower is still there today. So is that little cute gas station right there on the road, the old road immediately south of Mount Shasta City. Now we have a quiz. I taught school for too long to not have quizzes, you know. So you saw the diagram of the concrete slab that held the tower and the concrete slab that held the generator house, and there are also arrows that pointed to the next beacon, so the pilot could look down and say, "Okay, this way." And here's an unusual one with 2 arrows on it. Anybody know where this one is? Nobody ever does. Anybody recognize that mountain? Well, there's another beacon on top of that mountain. This is Acalanes Ridge open space. Right next to the freeway. This is Walnut Creek right there in the middle of the photo. I learned about this, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and I walked up there, and looked, it's right there. Still there, and now that it's open space, it's going to stay there for a long time to come. There's no real reason for anybody to want to knock that concrete out. The curiosity is that nobody seems to know what those arrows actually point to. Concord is a little bit close, maybe Antioch and Pittsburgh. Somebody guessed Sacramento, but Sacramento is way too far away. So I don't know. So what about our beacon, the one on Monte Diablo? Comparable. It was one of 5 beacons that were sponsored by Standard Oil of California. I think you've heard of that company. They were all erected in 1928 with a this one has this same design. It's on a 70-foot tower, and then the filament of the beacon is another 5 feet above the tower, so it's a 75-foot tall combination there. To give you a feel for the scale, the 2 letters, Standard Diablo, the D is 8 feet tall and the S is 12 feet tall. This is big.
John, why did they make the S larger? Obviously, they were advertising Standard, not Standard Oil, not Diablo.
So this one was lighted in April of 1928. It was lighted simultaneous with another one, actually on Standard Oil property in Los Angeles, which was the SL beacon, Standard Los Angeles. Again, great fanfare at the time. This is a Standard Oil magazine that they put out for their employees. You can see the stylized painting there. Just for fun, I saw that airplane and I thought, well, I got to figure out what that is. It's a Ford trimotor, and that would be Standard Oil's own airplane. They did in fact have in their fleet a Ford trimotor. And on the right, this is an article in the Chronicle, April 11th, 1928. Again, lots of publicity because this was a big thing. And in fact, our beacon and the one in Los Angeles were lighted by Charles Lindbergh. And you think it was in May of 1927 that he made his flight across to Paris. This man at the time was a national hero. And he was in Denver and threw a switch in Denver to light those 2 beacons, one in Los Angeles and the one on Monte Diablo. So how were they used? Again, it was there was no radar, no radio communication at the time. These are compass bearings. So imagine a pilot flying in from Los Angeles. He'd fly up to the beacon and want to turn left to get to Oakland or San Francisco, and those are the compass bearings. You see the 128 degrees going down to Livermore, even right here in Concord at 306 degrees from Monte Diablo. Notably, number 2 there is Crissy Field in San Francisco. That's long gone, isn't it? So the beacon shone every night. It was lighted automatically by a clock. The clock has been lost, and then interestingly, it was kind of high tech at the time. I'll show you another thing when we get to it. It even had an electric communication system down to the switchboard in the community of Diablo, so that if a bulb burned out, a signal would be sent down to Diablo, and the switchboard operator would know to call the electrician to go get a new light bulb. So the beacon shone nightly until 1939, and it was taken down in anticipation of the new Summit building, which of course is where it sits today. Can you see? This is when looking through the history of the beacon and trying to learn as much as I could about it. Of course, I looked at lots and lots of photographs and lots of newspaper articles. This is by far my favorite photo. The beacon is, of course, locally, not the beacon, the Summit building started construction in 1939, was built with locally quarried stone by the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, during the Depression. And that pile of rock is the Summit building. Well, it will be. You note the cars, the viewing platform that actually is at the very summit, and that's in fact where the beacon is today, right at the very tippy top of the building.